All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Price. I'm the executive director of Be the Change Venture. And so I am very honored to have our first podcast guest, if you want to say, is a good friend of mine, Ahmed Badr. And I'll introduce him, even though he doesn't deserve or need an introduction because he's an amazing guy. But Ahmed considers himself a writer, social entrepreneur, and poet. Not only is he one of my good friends, like I said before, but he's also a junior at Wesley University in Middletown, Connecticut, and founder of a global platform, not just a local platform, a global platform for young people to express themselves through creative expression called Narratio. Ahmed, let me just first say thank you for allowing me to have this conversation and being able to share this moment with you. Because, as you know, Be the Change Mentor, we officially launched part one of the Connection series where uh, we want to provide young people a space to connect and learn from amazing people like you who are doing amazing things in the world. So, thank you for taking this risk with us to have this conversation on storytelling. I want you to kind of briefly, and I know you share your story a lot, but I want to challenge you really briefly ask you, what's your story? Let's say if someone poses a question in 5 minutes, could you tell your story?
So my story started in Baghdad in Iraq in 1998. I was born there and stayed there for the first 8 years of my life. We left in 2006, 3 years after the Iraq War started. We were forced to flee our home and then moved to Syria, to Aleppo, but we stayed for a year and then moved to the coast of Syria. And you know, after staying in Syria for 2 years, um, my parents were on paid leave. They were civil engineers in Baghdad, uh, and so we had to make a choice: do we stay in Syria? Do we stay in Iraq? And so they decided to apply to this UN refugee program. And against all odds, we were really, really privileged to be able to get that. And we were resettled to the U.S. on May 19th, 2008, 10 years ago this past month. And so ever since then, and especially over the past 4 years, I've been, trying to, retell my family story and encourage other people to realize the story, or excuse me, to realize the power of storytelling, to, not only empower yourself, but empower everyone around you. So, whether it's people that have been affected by displacement, or individuals, young people specifically, that are in the middle of multiple identities that are trying to figure them out. Narratio is a place for all of those identities to exist and to thrive.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm kind of intrigued. What is Narratio? I know Narratio, but the world or whoever who's watching this podcast or webcast may not
Yeah,
know what exactly that is. So, could you talk about Narratio?
sure. Yeah. So Narratio is an online platform for you know publishing poetry and art and photography and stories of young people from all over the world. So after we publish these posts, we compile them into booklets that we use in our storytelling workshops all across the states. And so, I mean, again, first and foremost, it's just a space, a global space for people for young people to express themselves. Recent projects, we partnered with a refugee camp in Greece where we published their creative work, young people in that camp. And, again, it's just, simply put, it's a space for young people to express themselves creatively.
Nice. Hey, why exactly create this organization? Why did you want? Why specifically you want to take the risk of creating a global platform that with school in mind and your family in mind and still trying to grasp with this thing called United States and that's something I'm still trying to figure out even though I was born here, but why exactly did you want to do that?
I'm still figuring it out. By no means have I figured it all out, but I think initially Narratio was kind of a way for give back in a way, because I realized the power of my own story, and I've been privileged to be in certain spaces where I've been able to tell it um, on a grand scale, and that's good and all, but it's just for me. And so Narratio is almost a way of turning that power into something that's accessible to people all over the world. So to me, that's why I started it, is to kind of turn these privileges that have been provided into something that can be accessible to people all over the world.
Hmm. And I think that's a very important, being accessible to the world, and that's one thing that we're trying to do with this connection series, is to highlight stories like yours and work that you're doing all over the world, to people and make it accessible. Because I think one thing that is very important, regardless of who you are and what you're doing, is if you make time for yourself to listen and
Yes.
to hear the power of a story, how it can impact so many lives. I think
Yeah.
that's, and I've had the opportunity to see that in many avenues, and just know, my friend, you are definitely impacting people's lives.
I appreciate it.
Of
Thanks.
course, of course. So I want to take a step back, going back to story.
Yeah.
What makes a good story? And then, from your experiences, how do you think a story can be unique, or can have impact, if one individual tries to share it?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and I think because you automatically assume that there are certain parameters that either validate someone's experience or invalidate it, right?
Hmm.
And one thing with Narratio is that we try to be very, very open to that definition of a story. It could be a poem. It could be, your typical, 3 pages, 4 pages, broken down by plot. So there are varying definitions in that way, but to me, one of the things that makes a story successful is its kind of personal aspect, and even in fiction, there are different aspects of storytelling that really make it powerful, and one of those is making it as personal as possible. And this is, it's been said before, but once you write about what you know most, and starting with your own personal experience, and makes that piece of work so much more honest, and so much more influential and so much more powerful. So I think once you start with your own experience and then expand, um, that makes for an amazing story, regardless of where it ends up, or how it's presented.
Do you think stories can be an effective mechanism to connect with someone? That's one thing that Be the Change really values, is connection.
Mm.
And I'm kind of curious to hear, have you used your story to connect with someone else? Whether that's someone you really wanted to get to know and they were notable, or whether it was just someone that you met, walking on the street, or met at a park, or met at a particular event,
Mm.
that you both got connected.
For sure. I mean, I always try to start with that whenever I meet someone, regardless if they're notable, or they're famous or not. That's not really a distinction, or it doesn't really change how I interact with different people. It always starts with that personal experience, and I think naturally, once you start to open up, once you start telling individuals about your own experience, more often than not, that's reciprocated, and that is can be seen across all different types of industries. And so, I know with Be the Change Venture, networking is such a central part of your mission. And I think that, in my own experience with networking, storytelling has been so useful in that way, and that you don't necessarily come into a situation with an agenda. You're kind of just simply trying to get to know that other person, and seeing how you guys can collaborate, and seeing what you have in common and what makes you different, how you can kind of combine that to create something really powerful. And so I think storytelling and networking are really, they really go hand in hand, and can empower one another, can amplify one another. Uh, but definitely, I think sharing your story with someone else heightens the chances for connection, and not only professional connection, but just personal connection, which then in turn can possibly lead to professional connection later on. But I think at a very basic and surface level, I think just sharing your story with someone um, in a professional or not a professional context can open up so many doors.
And I want to put you on Front Street. I want to put you on the spot. Could you talk
Yeah.
about some of what have been some notable experiences when you know shared your story to someone and then you guys automatically connected, or you said, hey, you know, I shared that particular experience, or I like that idea, or I love Narratio. I heard about Narratio as well.
Mhm.
Can you share that?
Um, this was, I think, a couple of years ago. I was part of this mentorship program, and I met someone, and he was really experienced in the music business. And he'd worked with some notable names, and I was a big hip hop fan. I was like, oh my god! Um,
It wasn't Lin
and
Manuel Miranda, right? You know,
no, no,
FYI, he's a Wesleyan alum. For those that don't know, Lin Manuel
no,
Miranda, and he created the
um,
play Hamilton on Broadway. So who knows? It could have been
exactly.
him, right?
No, not him. But we kind of just sat down and started talking about life, nothing related to kind of what he did or whatever. And we ended up we're both he was from Houston, and my family lives in Houston, and so just that simple connection led into so many different things in terms of because you had just that one thing in common, and then you started to use that as a way to explore all the other things, and now that person is one of my closest mentors, and we talk almost every day. So it just goes to show how just one simple question or one simple point of connection or point of relating to someone can lead to something so beautiful, and that happened at any time with any person, regardless of their stature or background.
I'm just curious. What are some of your favorite questions to ask people, just when you're trying to get to know them?
What's your story? Because a lot of people are really not used to hearing that question, and I've never really stopped to think, what is my story? How can I present it in a short amount of time? And you usually get a lot of sighs. You're like, oh, because people are are not used to people being specifically interested in their experience, and it's always fun to kind of see how that initial answer comes up, because sometimes it's like all at once. It's like, hey, this, and this, and sometimes it starts out kind of bit by bit and starts to
Yeah.
build up. But definitely, what's your story? It's definitely a go-to, and then from there, um, you know, you can start to build off.
Hmm.
There isn't like a specific thing. What's your story is usually a good start.
One thing my team and I quickly observe when we go to high schools and we engage with young people, we want people think that we shove networking down their throats, but we don't.
Yeah,
One thing that we really spend a lot of time is really getting to know them and their stories. And I walk up to every young person in the classroom, shake their hand, give them eye contact, and just curious, like, what's your story? Tell me who you are.
yeah,
And many struggle with that, which is, I don't know if I, if I was in high school, I love telling people my story, but what I've learned now, I'm not sure if this is just me that I love sharing my story, but a lot of people have difficulty sharing who they are. And I think that's really powerful, because there's so many perceptions and many people stereotype you and judge you by the way you look or by the way you act, by the way you hold yourself. And so I think that, in short, stories are unique. We have many difficulties. We face many adversities, but it's very important to share that, because
yeah, yeah.
you don't know the impact that the person receiving it has on them. And so I want to get your thoughts on, for a young person that's trying to figure out the best way to share their story, how can they
Mm.
exactly do that, and where do you think Be the Change Venture could fill that gap, or where could we come in to help them share their story in the most effective way as possible?
can show by example, right? And oftentimes, especially when it comes down to representation, when young people see someone that looks like them
Mm.
sharing an experience that may be similar to theirs, that's very powerful in of its
Yeah.
own. But I think in a lot of communities, speaking out and kind of sharing your story, especially as a young person, it's very, very difficult because you're automatically almost separating yourself from the pack, right? And that's hard for many young people to do, especially in high school and middle school, where we're taught to kind of blend in or fit in. And so that's kind of a bigger issue that I think, you know, that's a much longer podcast, a much longer conversation. Um, but I think in terms of what we can do, as advocates for our respective communities, is that simply sharing our own stories shows that it is possible,
Mm.
and that you can empower yourself just by sharing your own experience. But you're right; it's a very, very difficult step to take. But I think it's made easier by the fact that there are other people that look like you that are doing it,
Mm.
and not all of those people are going to the schools and trying to make that direct impact. So that's worth something, I think. And also, I think, as young people speaking and working with young people, speaking to and working with young people, um, it's important to just realize that we're accessible. You know what I mean? We're not these figures that hide behind the shadows and try to pretend like we're something we're not. It's like, no, we're like the same age or around the same age, and we're here to help, and we're here to build. Uh, and so I think once we start to realize that and do more of that, we'll be in a really, really good place.
How can people get involved in the work that you're doing, or follow the work that you're doing? Talk about some of the things that you're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks, or this summer, or in the next year. I know that's a lot, but I would love for people to hear about that.
Yeah, so Narratio is getting ready to kind of, we're launching a whole new set of content.
Nice.
The team is still building, so we're looking for editors and contributors. And so just narratio.org and ARRATIO.org. You can learn more about that. And all of my project and work are on my personal website, which is just ambadr.com. Involved in a few projects relating to refugee storytelling and art that have already launched, and some are already are being prepared as we speak. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But this summer I'll be in Europe.
Nice.
Working on a book project. I'm doing storytime workshops with refugee youth.
Nice.
So I'm just preparing for that now. So that's kind of everything that's happening.
Do you have room in your suitcase for me to travel? I can.
Of course, please.
I mean, I'm more than 50 pounds, so I hope you can pay the baggage fees. Well, I'm extremely grateful for your time. Thank you so much for being our first speaker, and this concludes the first episode of the Connection series. And if for those that are watching this, if there's any other things that you want us to cover, feel free to let us know in the comment section, or send us an email, or reach out to us at bethechangementor.com.